Hey guys, Phil from Trail Talk MTB here, and this week we're going to be looking at the best value enduro bikes for 2019. So let me just start with this. I don't think anyone's first dual suspension bike should be an enduro bike. I think you should lean more towards a shorter travel trail bike. You're going to progress a lot better on a shorter travel bike. The big bike won't be doing all the work for you. You're just generally going to have a little more fun, and you're going to be riding more kind of flowy trails, more undulating trails, and a shorter travel bike leans more towards that kind of riding. So if you want to look at my best budget trail bikes for 2019, I'll leave the video in the description. However, if your terrain's a bit more demanding, really rocky, chunky, fast, got some big drops, some jumps, and you're doing a lot of big climbs followed by big descents, then I think you should be looking more towards an enduro bike. So here's some of my criteria when I was looking for these kind of bikes. So you want a slack head angle of around 64.5 to 66 degrees. So nice and slack, we'll keep it nice and stable. You want a decent reach on there, so you want a bit more freedom to move around the bike and you don't want to feel like you're pitched over the front. So a reach on a size large from around about 465 to around 480 would be ideal. We want some kind of slightly longer chainstays than a trail bike, so looking kind of around that 430 to 450 mark, preferably in between around 440, and that would give you a good balance between maneuverability and stability as well. You also want a decent seat angle as well, so something that's nice and steep. When you're on these bikes and you're climbing, they've got a bit more travel, so you're going to sag into it a bit, and that's going to slacken your seat angle. So you want something that's relatively steep. So around about 75 to 77 is really ideal on these kind of bikes. And then lastly, you want a decent amount of travel as well. So around about 150 to 170 millimeters of travel is ideal. However, most people's enduro trails might not justify this, so looking at something that has more towards that 130 to 150 might suit you a bit better, but we're going to be really focusing on bikes that have 150 to 170 today. So for a lot of you, this will be a second dual suspension bike, and you're starting to realize that mountain biking is a really expensive hobby, and you do have to spend a decent amount of money to get a decent bike. However, I think where value meets performance is kind of around about that 4,000 Australian dollar mark. And that's really the point that you're going to start seeing diminishing returns. Looking at some other currencies, that's probably around about 2,250 pounds and 3,000 US dollars. But yeah, I think this is the point that you probably want to be around. And a lot of the bikes that we're going to be talking about, the recommended retails around about this 4,000 mark, but you're going to be able to find them for a little bit less. So some of them are going to be more towards that 3,000 to 3,500 Australian dollar mark. So the first bike we're going to be looking at is actually one that I've owned and reviewed, so if you want to check out the link in the description, I'll put it in the bio, and that's the Merida One-Sixty 800. So when the bike was released in 2017, it was actually really progressive for such a big brand, and very cheap as well. So the recommended retail price is $4,000, but it's found as low as $3,450. The geo is really dialed on the bike, so having a look here, you can see, yeah, even now with 2 years later, after this year, it's still pretty crazy. So 65.3 degree head angle, 75 degree seat angle, 430 chainstays, so a bit on the smaller side, a bit more playful, and then a reach of 474 millimeters on the large. So this is probably the best spec bike out of all the ones that we're going to be looking at. So looking at the fork, we've got the Aeris RC, which is an awesome fork. We've also got the Kodar's amazing brakes, as well as the SRAM GX Eagle, and then you've also got the top of the line RockShox Super Deluxe RCT. Good tyres as well, me and DHRs, 3C up the front, and then you got the regular dual compound in the rear, and then a KS11 Integra dropper post. So really great spec. It's actually a steal at this kind of price. So I really like this bike. It really excels in that kind of chunky terrain, so what we have in Sydney, bit slower but very technical, a lot of square edge hits with lots of rocks, and with 170 millimeters of travel up front and a more linear feeling 160 millimeters of travel in the rear, it just eats rocks for breakfast. So if your terrain is more fast and more flowy, then I think there might be some other bikes out there that might suit you a bit better. But yeah, if you're bit slower, bit more technical terrain, and that linear suspension is really going to help you. If you want to make it feel a bit more progressive, then you can just put some more volume spacers in there, and that should help in those more kind of fast flowy terrain. But yeah, other than that, it's also a really good platform to build on. You put a charger damper in that Aeris, and you've got a Lyric, and then once you change the wheels over, that'll reduce the weight a little bit as well, and it should pedal even better than it already does. So yeah, really good bike, great value for money. So the next bike is actually another one that I've owned, and that's the Nukeproof Mega 290. So Nukeproof has really been killing it this year with their racing, with Elliot Heap winning the junior men's overall in the EWS, as well as Sam Hill winning the overall in the open men's. They both use the Nukeproof Mega 275. I'm going to be looking at the Nukeproof Mega 290. I just think for enduro racing, the 29 is probably a little bit better, but they seem to be doing fine at 27.5, so if that's your preference, that's the way to go. But yeah, the Mega 290, it's definitely a bike that's built for speed, and that's reflected in the chainstay length of 450 millimeters. That's kind of expected because the bike was built for the Mega Avalanche, and for the start of that race, you need bucket loads of stability, so it makes sense. The rest of the bike's geo is pretty good as well, so coming down here, we've got a 75.5 degree seat angle, 66 head angle. I've seen people measure it, it was more towards 65.5, so a little bit slacker, which is good. 470 millimeter reach on the size large, and then you've got 150 millimeters of travel in the rear, as well as 160 millimeters up front. So the spec's pretty good for the price as well. So coming up here, you've got NX Eagle. Real highlight, you've got the new Yari with the charger damper for this year, which is awesome to see. And it's also got that new Debonair air spring, which makes these new RockShox forks feel amazing, super plush. Another highlight, you've got those Michelin tires, which is good to see. Personally, it would have been nice to see some better brakes. So you've got the guide T's, not a huge fan of those. And you've also got a shock that doesn't have a lockout, which for these kind of bikes, especially if they don't pedal the best, you're definitely going to know about it. So the main downside I noticed when I had this bike, there's not a whole lot of mid-stroke support built into the kinematics of the suspension. So I definitely prefer chunkier sections when you're kind of using most of the travel. So if you're doing flowier stuff with a lot of big hits, then it probably won't like this bike too much. But yeah, it definitely prefers fast speeds that are definitely really chunky. So a solution to this is putting a coil on it. So it does have a progressive leverage curve, so it does suit a coil relatively well. Yeah, and when I put this on my bike, it transformed it, made it a bit more versatile. So something like the Cane Creek Coil IL would be a good option. Yeah, it just swallows rocky terrain. Really good bike, but yeah, if you prefer those higher speed sections, then it's going to be a bike that definitely suits you. So no shock here, the next bike on the list is actually another one I've owned. It's actually my current bike, and that's the Bird AM9. If you want to check out the full review on the bike, you can actually check the link in the description. I've got a written review as well as a video review, and they'll go into depth about the bike and what I really liked about it. So in this list, I'd probably say that the Bird is probably the most versatile bike, especially with the sizing, due to the short seat tube. So looking at the geometry here, on the medium long it's 440, and then on the large it's 470, which is kind of standard for a large, but the medium long has a 475 millimeter reach, so still big for a medium long. That's bigger than most of the larges we're going to be talking about today. Then the large has 500 millimeters of reach, so really on the big side. So you can kind of dial that into what you prefer. So if you do more faster trails, then going with a larger bike is definitely going to be the way to go, and that's what Bird recommend. If you do a lot more all mountain riding and your trails are a lot more variable, then going the size down will definitely be a bit more beneficial, and it kind of feels more like a normal large. So I'm 6'1", and yeah, I went with a medium long that has 475 millimeters of reach. Looking at the rest of the geo, pretty dialed as well. So 65.5 degree head angle, 76 degree seat angle, and then a nice balanced chainstay of 440. So it really puts you in the middle of the bike, really balanced. So balances that agility with the agility with the stability of the bike. So what sets Bird apart compared to a lot of other brands is you can actually customize the bike yourself. So you can pick from different builds, so you see here. So they start from £2,100, which is around about $3,700 Australian. However, you have to factor in import tax, GST, and all that kind of stuff if you bring it to Australia. I don't know the case for the US, but yeah, you can see builds starting from around that price point, and then you can customize it the way you want. If you want a better fork, you want a better shock, better wheels, you can do that, which is really awesome. If you really want to know more about the bike, then I'd recommend checking out my review. I'll put the link in the description. But just quickly, the bike probably feels like it has more like 160 millimeters of travel as opposed to the 150 that it actually has. So hitting the rough stuff, you really feel like there's a bunch of support. However, there's still enough mid-stroke support that you can really push through the bike and get pumped through the features on the trail. And the low standover really helps in this, so you can really throw this bike around. It's a really fun bike, and it's also really good all around, and it can handle those big hits as well, so you can take to the bike park if you want. It's definitely an overbuilt frame, so you're not going to worry about braking or anything like that. It's an awesome bike, so yeah, definitely give this one a look. So like the Bird, the next bike on the list is also direct sales, and that's the YT Capra 29AL. It's hard to beat direct sales value, and when the geo is dialed, it gets even better. So coming in at 3,899 Australian dollars, including import tax and duty, the Capra 29AL is a really great build. Looking down at the specs that we have here, you're getting killer specs for the money. That's expected with a direct to sales brand. So you get a Lyric up front, so awesome fork. You've got Kodar brakes, which is awesome as well. You've got the SLX drivetrain, and that's mixed with the E13 cassette, so that 9 to 46 tooth cassette, which is really good to see as well. And then you also get some decent wheels on there, which is, you don't usually see that on these kind of bikes. So DT Swiss E1900s, so really great wheels. They're real highlights. So the Geo is pretty similar to the Bird in the sense, so down here, in the sense that they do have shorter seat tubes, so you can kind of tailor the size to the needs that you have. So if you want a bit more stability, then you'd go the extra large for me. So for example, I'm 6'1", you go the extra large, so it has 485 millimeters of reach. And then if you wanted something that's a bit more nimble, your trails are a bit tighter, then you can go the large, so with a 465 millimeters of reach. So you can really tailor it to your terrain. So other highlights as well, you got a 65.5 degree head angle, which can be changed with the flip chip to 66, the same as the seat angle, so it goes 76 to 76 to 76.5. And then you've also got 440 chainstays. So I think that's really the golden zone for these kind of bikes. Keeps it nice and balanced, nice stable, but you can still throw the bike around a little bit as well. The only real problem is catching them in stock. They're pretty hard to get a hold of. And that's pretty hard. So if you ride park, I'd probably lean more towards the Capra 27, so yeah, the 27.5 inch model. But if you're racing Giro, then I'd probably go more towards the 2.9. They've built the suspension kinematics more around a bit more stiffness with the 2.9, so it does have a bit better of a pedaling platform, a bit more progression. So yeah, if you're pedaling a lot and you're racing, then I think that platform will probably be a bit better. But if you're going to the bike park and you're doing a lot more rowdy terrain where you just need it to be a little bit more plush, then I think the 27.5 might be a better option. But yeah, this is probably one competing with the Merida for the best value for money. It's an awesome bike, and you're gonna love it if you get it. You just need to get it when they're available. So now for the last bike on the list, and again, like last week, we're going back to the roots of mountain biking, and we're looking at the Marin Alpine Trail 8. So this was a brand new frame for 2018. The geometry is slightly shorter than a few of the other bikes that we've been looking at, so the reach and the size large is 465, but not too crazy, only 5mm shorter than the others. But it has a nice slack head angle on it, so 65 degrees, and with those 20-inch wheels, there should be bucket loads of stability on tap. And then with those 430mm chainstays, so down with the geometry here, should keep it nice and playful. So it's probably going to be similar to the 160 in that you can kind of throw it around a bit more, so a bit more playful than a lot of the other bikes on the list. Then you've got a decently steep seat angle there. So on the size large, you've got a 75.68 degree seat angle. So looking at the spec, it's pretty impressive as well. So some highlights, you've got the Fox 36 up front with 160mm of travel, and then you got the DPX2 taking care of the 150mm of travel in the rear. Some other highlights, you got the TRP slate brakes, they're awesome, and then you got NX Eagle, and then something you don't usually see, so you got some decent finishing kit on there, so some Datey stuff, so the copper head stem and the black label bars, and that's pretty cool to see. So the rear suspension on this bike, not as sophisticated as a lot of the other ones that we've seen, so it uses a linkage actuated single pivot. However, from the reports that I've seen, the kinematics are actually pretty good, so it seems to be pretty dialed for a single pivot bike. So nice and supportive, pretty plush off the top, and there's not too much of a harsh progression, but there's still some progression here, so decent mid-stroke. So you're not going to be disappointed with the kinematics of the suspension. Should be pretty good. The only thing that you're probably going to notice is probably it's not going to be the most active under braking, which is kind of what you expect with these single pivot bikes. But there you go, that's all the bikes. The Marin looks pretty sweet, and if you live in America, you should be able to get some pretty good deals on those. If you live in Australia, look at some of the Polygon gut bikes. There's some pretty similar models that come from the same factory. Slightly shorter reach, but yeah, they're pretty much identical to these kind of bikes, and they use the same linkage essentially. So yeah, take a look at those. But yeah, the Marin's an awesome bike. So there you go, that's my top 5 best value enduro bikes for 2019. If I was to stretch the list out to probably 6, I'd like to add the Vitus Summit VR 2019. Very similar geometry to the Merida One-Sixty, however I prefer the Merida One-Sixty, and that's kind of why I took this place on this list. But yeah, if you live in the UK, this will be a great value bike of chain reaction, like the Nukeproof Mega. You can also get it from there, and there's some great deals on there as well. So I'm sure I missed out on a few bikes. If I did, leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, and also subscribe to the channel where we've got a few more reviews and some buyer's guides coming soon as well. And then if you wanted to check out some of the reviews for the bikes mentioned in this video, the links will be in the description. Thanks for listening, guys.